Hello YouTubers and Doctor Who fans, I hope you're all well. In today's ranking video, I shall be giving you my own personal ranking for what I think are the top 5 Regeneration stories from Doctor Who so far. Now, these are just my opinions, so if they're different to yours, then feel free to make a comment below and let us know what your personal favourite Regeneration stories are. So without further ado, let's begin. Number 5. Logopolis, the final story of the 18th season, saw the 4th Doctor, played by Tom Baker, fall to his death after battling with the Master. The majority of the story takes place on the planet Logopolis, and there's a lot of fascinating stuff in here. We have an interesting dynamic with the TARDIS, the whole fate of the universe is at stake, and some plot points of this season are tied together here with the whole entropy theme. We also have the mystery which surrounds the mysterious figure known as the Watcher, and it is only in the final moments when we find out what it is. The final part of this story is one of the best episodes in Doctor Who history in my opinion, as I genuinely feel this was the day of reckoning. Millions have been killed, and that regeneration scene is one of the best that we have ever had. Number 4. The End of Time, a divisive story to say the least, and quite honestly, if you asked me a few years ago, I would have actually put the 10th Doctor's final story at number 1 because it does have everything. It has drama, it has action, it has the Master. They even brought back the Time Lords for this one. However, I feel this story has fallen down in my estimation since then, mainly due to the way the 10th Doctor is whining about not wanting to go and all of that. I love the final montage, and you know, we get to see all his companions and everything. It's touching, but now when I rewatch the story as a whole, I feel like there should have been something more to round off his era with, instead of just having a tour around like all of his era right at the end, visiting all his companions and everything. Because for me, the Tennant era is easily the best in the modern run. Also, I'm not that much of a fan of John Simm's Master in this story. He's just a little bit over the top in this, especially in the dinner time scene. Thankfully, I feel like this was really rectified in the recent World Enough and Time and the Doctor Falls two-parter from Series 10. But still, there are some really great parts. The regeneration itself is again one of the best. Tennant acts his heart out, Timothy Dalton is a good Rassilon, and I think Bernard Cribbins gives what is probably his best performance as Wilfred Mott. This does have flaws though, and since a few years ago I have rewatched other regeneration stories which I now think are much better than this. Number 3. The War Games. For the 2nd Doctor's final story, we got 10 episodes worth of great telly. All sorts of stuff happened in this, and I honestly just love it even more every time I watch it. Patrick Troughton's performance as ever is great, especially in the very last episode. Not only is this his swan song, but also companions Jamie and Zoe. And this has also got to be one of the best companion exits in my honest opinion. People go on about Donna's memory being wiped, which is fine because that was also a very sad ending, but this was the first time where the companions having their memories wiped actually happened, and I think that this is probably better. It's heartbreaking to watch because both Jamie and Zoe know what's coming. The conflict between them and the Time Lords is great. Their belief that they're going to win again, only to lose, is just so hard to see. These characters have been through so much and have always managed to save the day, but in this, the Doctor and his companions are finally being beaten by none other than the Time Lords. You especially feel sorry for the Doctor because he is forced to change at the very end and is exiled to Earth. The only letdown for me is that we don't actually see the regeneration. Instead we got a weird Bohemian Rhapsody-like sequence. And what happened next was left ambiguous for the next 6 months until Doctor Who returned in colour with John Pertwee in 1970. Overall, The War Games is one of my favourite stories of all time. All of the different plot points which were going on I thought were done really well. It is criminally underrated, and it was a milestone in the history of the programme. Strangely enough, it also worked really well as a 10-part epic. Usually there's some stories from around this era which were 6 or 7 parts long, and I thought that they really dragged on for too long. But at 10 episodes, I think this works really well. I highly recommend this to anyone who is looking to get into classic Doctor Who, especially the Patrick Troughton years, as this serves as one of the best final stories for any Doctor. Number 2. Bad Wolf and the Parting of the Ways. For those of you who have watched my videos regularly, then you will know how much I like this episode. The final story for the 9th Doctor sees him pitted against those giant pepper pot things. I can't remember what they're called again, but they're quite popular. All jokes aside, I think this was and still is the best regeneration story out of the revised series of Doctor Who, simply because all the others aren't as good, and the Daleks might be at their very best here since they were brought back in 2005. Overall, as a story, this flows really well. Christopher Eccleston is so amazing in the part, as is Billie Piper's Rose Tyler and John Barrowman's Captain Jack. All this is one part featuring a mysterious game station, and the second part is the Dalek invasion. It's so simple yet so effective. Like Logopolis, you feel like everything is at stake here. You can see that in Eccleston's performance, and he sends Rose back to her own time to save her because the Doctor knows damn well that not everyone is going to get out alive, and when she comes back as Bad Wolf, he absorbs a time vortex from her, and it's all in self-sacrifice. It's beautiful, it's heroic, it's what the Doctor can do when he's at his very best. The regeneration scene at the end is great as well, and it doesn't feel like forced down your throat like the later ones do. I may sound a bit biased by saying this, because this makes me nostalgic, because this introduced me to regeneration. I had no idea about it when this was first broadcast. In hindsight, some may complain that this story works well on its own right anyway, but the regeneration was tacked on right at the end. I can see why some would say this, but we can assume that we were not guaranteed to get a second series of New Who while this was in the final stages of being written. Before we make it to number 1, here are a few honourable mentions. And number 1 is The Caves of Androzani. Well, surprise, surprise, here is what I think is the best regeneration story. It's got everything. It's got a great villain, it's got a great plot, a great writer, some of the greatest cliffhangers ever. It's so iconic. And I think this is how a regeneration story should be done. While I don't think that this story is perfect by any means, due to that silly monster and a couple of other personal nitpicks that I have, I think that this is the definitive regeneration story because the Doctor is so heroic. He more or less sacrifices himself to save Perry. It is one of the reasons why I love The Parting of the Ways so much, because the 9th Doctor absorbs the time vortex energy in order to save Rose. Here I think it is handled even better, because the Doctor at this point hardly even knew Perry as far as the TV show went. You know, Big Finish did have some more stories with the 5th Doctor and Perry, but if we just ignore that and just pretend that he only had 2 stories with her, she only got introduced in the story before this one, so having the Doctor make his own sacrifice to save someone he hardly knows with the bat's milk at the end defines what the Doctor should be all about. In episode 3, Regeneration is starting already, but the Doctor fights it off just for a bit longer so he can save Perry just in time. It's ironic how just before he does regenerate at the end of part 4, for a brief moment, the 5th Doctor is actually unsure if he will actually die or regenerate. In a way, regeneration is like death, except the Doctor becomes somebody else. But still, this is really good stuff. When Robert Holmes wrote this, he didn't go all out and write a story about evil beings wanting world domination, causing the Doctor to regenerate. What he did instead was create the worlds of Androzani, introduced all of these supporting characters just for this one story, all of whom want to kill each other. In a rare instance, nobody is on the Doctor's side, or Perry's side. The Doctor is fighting against everybody. What you get from this is one of the best one-off villains in Doctor Who's entire history as well, in the form of Sheraz Jek. He is a creep. Even though we see him for only around 90 minutes of TV, we feel that he is a character who has got so many layers. He is so messed up, and you want to feel sorry for him in a way, but at the same time you hate him. And that for me is what's so great about him. Now, I can go on and on about how great the Caves of Androzani is for hours, so let's wrap this up. Thanks for watching this video. Feel free to comment with your own opinions on Regeneration stories, and if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel for some more Doctor Who related content. Take care guys, and I'll see you next time.